All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Health Pigs podcast. We are the Health Pigs, the guinea pigs of health. And today we have a great episode lined up for you guys. We have Dr. LeBlanc, aka Dr. Busy Mom. I love that nickname on the show. And we're going to dive into a lot about metabolic disease, anti-inflammatory diets, and a bunch of other stuff. Really excited to have you here, Dr. LeBlanc.
Hey,
How's it going?
great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just a quick introduction. Dr. LeBlanc is a doctor of natural medicine, a certified clinical nutritionist, as well as a certified functional medicine practitioner. She does have a practice in Louisiana, but has been doing a lot of virtual work lately, which is awesome to see the flexibility, and has been getting a lot of patients talking about metabolic disease due to the coronavirus. But first, why don't we just talk about your backstory, Dr. LeBlanc? How did you get into doctor of natural medicine and kind of this field in general?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, my holistic healthcare career started back with chiropractic. I was injured and I went to a chiropractor, got great results, and my health started to improve overall. So I decided to go to chiropractic school, quit the corporate world, became a chiropractor, started practicing. And once I started practicing, I started diving into functional medicine. You know, back then, we're going back now at least 7 years. It was still sort of evolving functional medicine. Now it's, this big buzzword because, getting to the root cause of anything is on everyone's mind. So back then it kind of wasn't. So I started dabbling in functional medicine. And then before I knew it, I took a few years to sort of really expand my education. And then I decided to go for the board certification in natural medicine because I felt like that was more of my calling. I really liked taking a sort of standard allopathic approach, which is just, you have this happening. You run this standard lab and then you get this standard medication, that's sort of cookie cutter. I like breaking that down. I like using the functional labs we have available to us now that really pinpoint where the deficiencies and breakdowns are happening in the body. People's lives turn around. So it's not only motivating, but it's encouraging to me because we can see a lot of these chronic things and diagnoses that most people think are the end, and this is what I am. We can see these patients sort of turn everything around, manage things in a sustainable way that sometimes doesn't need these long-term medications. So it's been awesome, and it's interesting how the roads sort of converge to now.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the key difference there is, treating the root cause, like you said, as opposed to symptom treatment. And that's one of the most powerful things that I love about functional and holistic medicine. And you touch upon, it becoming a buzzword now, which I think is fantastic. But how has the dynamic changed, you say, like from 5 years ago in terms of like public perception around what you do? And are you in general just getting more patients because of it?
I do. I think that because we see a lot of holistic practitioners becoming mainstream, whether they're becoming New York Times bestselling authors or they're teaming up with the celebrity doctors like Dr. Oz, the acceptance of functional medicine where it was 5 years ago to now is vastly different. So I think more for me in practice now, patients aren't hearing that word for the first time. Whereas before it's like functional, what doesn't make sense? It sounds like, wait, I heard that guy on Dr. Oz. That's what functional medicine is. So it's a little bit more, I think, accepted. I wouldn't say it's totally mainstream, but it's not like a foreign term. So that's been really great because patients are more aware of it and don't think that they just have one option anymore. They can kind of weigh out all of their options when they're thinking about attacking what's going on in their health.
Yeah, I think it's great. I guess everyone just needs to link up with Dr. Oz, and then everyone will have no problem going to see a functional doctor. But yeah,
Right.
In general, I mean, I think it's still from maybe like insurance or just high level view, still kind of getting there, and I think it can get better. But the amount of progress that's been made the last 5 years, it seems to be substantial. And I would say that overall is trending with health, right? We're seeing more and more health foods that are legitimately health foods because the boom in YouTube and podcasts is just putting a lot of education out there that, you don't need to go to med school or schooling to find out about all these things. You can kind of research on your own, and PubMed, WebMD, of course, publishing research. So I think the public is becoming a lot more knowledgeable, which is fantastic, but we still have a long ways to go. And that's exactly what I want to talk about. But before we get there, I read on your site, you know, you call yourself Dr. Busy Mom, which is great. And you originally got into medicine because you had like horrible allergies.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that for a second? I'm just super interested.
So I was really sick as a kid, had horrible allergies, and, you know, my parents just doing, you know, what they can, the best they can. It was a steady stream of doctors, pediatricians, allergists, all kinds of stuff. I was hospitalized numerous amounts of times. I've had tons of surgeries before the age of 10. So I never really, I just didn't really have a baseline of what really health was. I just kind of always was like that kid that always got sick. You sneezed on me, I was sick for a week. So I never understood why, you know, immunity was not something I wasn't really aware. I didn't really connect things. I wasn't, how do you even know what you're eating is affecting you at that young age? You don't. So it was a whole journey, like I told you, about going into the corporate world and then segueing into chiropractic, that really opened my eyes to how everything works in the body as a whole. And you're the sum of the parts and not the opposite. And that how you can actually change your status. Wherever your health is today can absolutely shift and change.
Yeah, that's a great point, that, you know, everything's connected. And I think that's what was overlooked for so long, that, you know, if you have brain fog, it's not because you hit your head necessarily. It could be because of your gut health. I mean, it could be just inflammation anywhere. And then obviously that accumulates across the body, and your body's really good at compensating, as we know, especially the brain, from my cases with concussions and TBIs. So it's hard to pinpoint that, and that's why it is great to see, you know, a specialist and a doctor like yourself, or a chiropractor, or whoever. But that's great to know. I mean, I feel like usually people have some sort of personal experience, and that's why they get so motivated to get into this field. That's why, you know, we started this podcast, because we know how much it sucks, and we know what's kind of wrong with the system. So we're trying to help out, and it's even more fantastic when you go and become, you know, a functional doctor like yourself, and are helping people every day. So awesome. Right away, I definitely want to talk about metabolic disease, or just being metabolically unhealthy. So I know that, I think you might know the number. I've seen a bunch of different statistics, but it's roughly like maybe like 10 to 15, or definitely less than 20% of people in the United States of America are considered metabolically unhealthy. So what exactly does that mean? And we can dive into why exactly you think it's the overwhelming majority of our population.
Well, metabolic disease is really breaking down blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar, right? All of these metabolic processes have become out of control. So for some reason, the baby boomer population is what we always refer to when they run these stats, because now they're our largest aging population. And they are huge pharmaceutical money makers, because one out of, I think this recent stat is 1 out of every 2 Americans has either one or all 3 of those metabolic disease process, either high blood pressure or high cholesterol, abnormal cholesterol, or high blood sugar. So you have to ask yourself, obesity, we throw that in. So when you have 3 or more out of the 4, we call that metabolic syndrome. That's known as a silent killer, because FYI, there's no warning to getting a heart attack, and there's no warning to getting a stroke. You get it, and then you deal with the consequences. Sometimes they're more unfortunate than others. But why is this? Why do 1 in 3 Americans, why are they fueling the pharmaceutical industry? Why are they not being told the whole story? Why do they go to the doctor and start, you know, in their twilight years, when they're starting to retire, why are they starting to feel their worst and not their best to enjoy it? So I think all these conversations, you know, we can't fault the general practitioners that are sort of managing these patients, because at the end of the day, when you go to med school, you don't get a whole lot of clinical nutrition, okay? You get a teeny tiny bit, maybe less than 100 hours. A lot of holistic practitioners have 3,000 hours of just clinical nutrition. You know, their job is to learn about pharmaceuticals, how to dose, and how to keep people well and alive, and rightfully so. So we can't fault them when they don't know how to have the conversation about diet and nutrition. Most of them have not gotten enough knowledge on it. So we take that, you know, if you think about that population, they were sort of raised as the doctor knows, listen to the doctor. So they take that to heart. They go on these medications that are only meant to be for 6 months or more. And then before you know it, 10, 15 years later, they're still on, the dosages are increasing, and they're ending up with other problems because now all of those drug side effects are coming into play. So I think that's why this is this ripple effect, you know, and it takes like somebody who's saying, I'm sick of having XYZ side effects. Why is this happening? What can I do to go back? What can I do to start changing things to really shift that? Because the conversation isn't going to start at the GP's office. It's just not.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like that they only get to the general practitioner when something is wrong. And there was such that baby boomer population, I feel like, has such a mentality that, you know, you go to the doctor once a year. Those are the people who are on top of their game. Some don't go to the doctors at all unless, you know, they're feeling horrible. And at that point, you know, you get your annual blood test, and that, I mean, that blood work is years in the making, right? If you have an unhealthy diet for decades, then it'll eventually catch up to you, but you might not know that in your 20s or even your 30s. But it seems, of course, like you said, that they're just treating the final symptom. And, you know, like you said, silent killer. You don't see it coming unless you're kind of on top of the game, which is what you do. And a lot more people nowadays are trying to be in preventative medicine, right? I think that's the key. The system is set up for when things go wrong, but how do you, healthcare when you're sick, but how do you prevent that from happening in the first place? And I think you touched upon some great points. And what are your thoughts around, you know, the standard American diet, or, you know, we joke about calling it sad that a lot of these baby boomers grew up, and kind of the education around that, the food pyramid, all that great stuff, maybe playing a role in this.
Well, I mean, the truth is, you know, when you grew up in the 50s, it was almost like a luxury to eat fast food. When that boomed in the late 40s, early 50s, it was sort of a novelty. It just became a problem when it became a part of everybody's life on a regular basis. Fast foods, convenience foods, packaged foods, processed foods. When we get busier and busier, those foods become easier and easier, make our lives easier, especially for women who are working moms and so on and so forth. And it spirals out of control because there really is no education on what you're eating, what it's doing in the body, and what it's depleting. And where did you start? Were you nutrient deficient before and you just started eating in a really, you know, way that's not good for you? Because the truth is, some people can eat fast food their whole life and have no health problems. I mean, these people exist. Genetically, I don't know how it's possible, but there are a few that can. At the end of the day, though, you know, you can only know your body, and you know the way you feel, and you have to kind of connect that. Say, you know what, something's off. You know, and then it's just, where do I start? How do I change the way I eat? What supplements do I need? And that's kind of where I come in.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have to dive more into the specifics of diet, but it is individuality for sure. And yeah, there are those people that, you know, if they eat the same thing every day, regardless if it's McDonald's or, you know, a healthy, like healthier diet, then they'll still live to 100 based on genetics. I mean, people have been living long times, but what percentage of that time is healthy, their health span, right? So I think that's the focus. I mean, I could tell you now that, like, I have family members that have been in nursing home for over a decade. And
oh, wow.
I don't consider that, you know, worth, you know, that's just prolonging life when it's already reached a certain point. We want to focus on health span instead of lifespan, right? That's what people, I feel like, always get confused, and, you know, have been saying that, you know, people have been living longer for decades, but in reality, the health span really hasn't gotten that much better. And I think recently, in the past, you know, 5 years or so, the lifespan has kind of plateaued, and a lot of that early boom was due to just preventing newborn deaths, right? So it's kind of like an anomaly within the statistic that people take for granted. So going back to metabolic disease, I do want to dive a little more into the specifics, and maybe like, so things that could help people, right? They go to see their doctor, they get a blood panel. What does this exactly mean in terms of like blood pressure, lipids, so your cholesterol, your triglycerides? because there is a lot of, misconceptions around that.
Yeah.
What's really the numbers we should be looking at, what ratios, as well as blood pressure can change in a moment's notice. I know for me, the last time I went to the doctor, I had really high blood pressure, but it was because I was late getting there. I was stressed from work that day, and I tested the next 3 days when I was calm, and it was fine. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the thing is, you just said what's very important is that, in that standard allopathic model, the CBC, the blood count is, just as good as the day you get it. Okay, that's it. And that is for some reason a hallmark, and it is, you're this diagnosis and then we'll see you in 6 months. I think that is the first place we go wrong, because the truth is you could do a lot in 6 weeks, let alone 6 months. So usually, all of the standard ratios by which we should sort of measure ourselves, that's American Medical Association, and that's across the board, even in holistic healthcare. What I like to do for somebody that comes to me that either has blood sugar, cholesterol, or blood pressure out of range is say, okay, so you've got this number, you may have this diagnosis, and you may already be on this medication, or they're recommending it. What do you do here? Well, I want to say, what is the root cause? Why are you being given this diagnosis? Why is your blood pressure out of control? A lot of people don't realize blood pressure is controlled by the kidneys. About 90% of our population walks around dehydrated all day long. Why? Because we don't drink enough water. And without enough water, the glomerular filtration rate by which your kidneys regulate blood pressure, it's either going to suffer, be sluggish, be slow, your heart rate goes up, because you're not hydrated enough. You hydrate, the kidneys can kind of slow down and not work so hard, your blood pressure comes down. So that first key right there is, are you drinking enough water? And I could tell you, my patients don't. They drink with my meds in the morning and have a glass of water at lunch, but it's coffee, teas, and sodas, okay? That's what America really drinks. So the first thing is to figure out the hydration. You get the hydration under control, it doesn't mean you solve the whole problem, right? Because then you have to then take it a step further. So when we look at cholesterol, what a lot of folks are not realizing is that your body makes cholesterol. 80% of the cholesterol in your body is made in the liver. It's how you make your hormones. So you need it. This whole thing of cholesterol is bad is just a very antiquated allopathic line that you hear in the doctor's office. But the truth is, where does the cholesterol get out of control? So what happened in the 80s? Well, high cholesterol means don't eat fat, don't eat butter, eat margarine. Don't drink regular soda, drink diet soda. These were all these complete misnomers that then catapulted into what? Diabetes, because people started eating processed foods, fast foods that were fat-free, because that was the cholesterol problem. And then that catapulted into blood sugar issues. So I'll back it up. When you have cholesterol issues, you have to figure out, why is the bad cholesterol getting out of control? Your LDLs and your triglycerides. If they are not in range, what is it that you're eating? And it doesn't always have to do with fat. Cholesterol is usually a sugar problem. Folks have way too much sugar in their diet, and this drives up the cholesterol because it turns the interior of your arteries into sandpaper, so that when you do eat some fat, good or bad fat, it sticks. So we drive up your cholesterol very easily. The bad cholesterol can skyrocket. So you really have to look at, okay, what am I eating? Where's the sugar coming from? And what's driving that cholesterol? Because at the end of the day, cholesterol is not bad. It's made in the liver. We need it. I often find that patients that have a cholesterol issue have a sluggish liver. Okay. They might even be on their way towards that, fatty liver scenario. So what's great about functional medicine is there's a lot of functional labs that can specifically look at what's your liver doing, what are the how are the detox pathways behaving. It's not just about elevated liver enzymes, which is a CBC thing. You can really look at how your liver's behaving, which is very important when you're talking about cholesterol. So when you then segue into blood sugar, which more often than not, folks that are eating this fat-free, sugar-rich diet, processed foods, they then have blood sugar issues. And you get to that borderline sort of like the diabetes, you're on the cusp. They don't want to say that you're diabetic. You just have blood sugar issues. Take this med and regulate it. Well, why is your blood sugar going up? Blood sugar is not a sugar problem. Blood sugar is a refined carbohydrate problem. And again, these folks that are eating that fat-free processed food diet are getting far too many refined mono starches. A lot of these genetically engineered starches are all refined carbs, and it drives your blood sugar crazy. So, again, you have to, it's looking at an onion and peeling it back and getting the right functional labs to see specifically on that individual patient, why is your body behaving the way it is? And let's figure out how to get it in stages back to a place where you actually feel good again. Because you aren't your diagnosis. You don't have to be this person with high cholesterol and blood sugar and high blood pressure the rest of your life, despite what they're told. And you can actually, if not modify, and sometimes in most cases reverse a lot of these metabolic disorders.
Wow, that was a lot. Fantastic. I'd love to hear that. Coming from you, definitely communicate that way better than I could. But yeah, it's kind of just like gaining an understanding. So what you said, blood pressure, it's extremely important to hydrate. So yeah, just cutting out those unnecessary drinks like sodas, sweetened teas, pretty much anything besides water, and maybe if you want coffee or tea in the morning, that's great. And some, even fruit juices, you got to be careful with. If they're just full of sugar anyway. So pretty much just get your water in. And then if you have your caffeinated beverage in the morning, you don't need to add, 30, 40 grams of sugar to that just to make it taste good. But that's just the starting point. And you brought up great points talking about cholesterol, right? So it's an individual basis, on, what cholesterol is going to happen in your body, but it's definitely, made out to be the bad guy for so many years. And it seems like that just had the biggest ripple effect, demonizing fats, demonizing cholesterol. Growing up, I remember my mom talking about that. She's like, I have like slightly high cholesterol, got to eat low fat. And she was all about like organic foods too. So even that just like was a public knowledge gap completely. And I think we're slowly reversing that. But now people still don't realize, when they should go see a doctor or when they need to take matters into their own hands. And the same thing, I love how you say the pre-diabetic phase, which basically if your HbA1c or your, fasting blood glucose is like close to 100 or close to, forget the level for HbA1c, close to like 5 or 6, right? And, you're on the cusp or you're not there, and then you're within range. So your doctor, if you even have a follow-up with your doctor, it's not going to get flagged, right, on your blood panel. So you'll just be like, oh, well, I guess it's normal. But those ranges are huge, right? So
especially if you just keep status quo, eating the way you're eating, living the way you're living, being as stressed out as you are, and you're just taking the medication to do what you're told to try and get that number back into range, and keep on living the way you're living with making no change. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and you're talking about medications. First step in my mind, would be try and seek what you can do in your life before going on medication. That's just, number one. You don't need to go there unless, something maybe is severely wrong or really have a severe medical condition. But if it's just the standard, slightly high blood pressure, fasting blood glucose and blood sugars, or cholesterol, first step should be look at your diet, look at your lifestyle, see what kind of changes you can make, and see someone like you who can give you the knowledge set and point you in the right direction so that you don't have to get on medicines, and we have people always like to talk about cost and price of like healthy foods are so expensive. But how much are you going to be paying for medicine that some people take for decades? We know how expensive insulin is in this country, and probably 70 to 80% of the type 2 diabetics don't even need it. They just don't need all of that. Maybe they need some, but they could make those changes in their diet.
You're going to pay now with the food you eat, or you're going to pay later.
Exactly. Yeah. I always have trouble convincing, some people to buy, whole organic foods and just going local for meats or vegetables, because, there is no ROI on your health. It's the best investment you can make, in my opinion, because whether you pay for it now or you're going to pay for it eventually, right, when you're older.
Correct.
And no one, you know, you want to live your life. We talked about health span versus lifespan, and that's the huge key here.
Mm-hmm.
So that are some great points. So what would you recommend for those ranges? Say the range cutoff for fasting blood glucose is at 100,
well, here's the thing.
and I'm at 95.
Yeah. So I don't really focus on the ranges, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't like my patients to get in their minds that they have to fit into that cookie cutter. Because when the American Medical Association designed this complete blood work panel, it was on a white, Caucasian, 18-year-old male, okay? 120/80 blood pressure is fantastic, but I've never taken a 120/80 on a woman yet in practice, and I've been doing this a long time. So I think that that's antiquated in itself. So if a patient comes to me, I don't even focus on the range. I look at what is breaking down in the body. Talk to me about your life. Are you retired? Are you working? Is your job stressful? What are you juggling? What's happening in the body? Because don't forget, everything is connected. You know, somebody that's got a very stressful job may have an adrenal gland issue to where they're in constant fight flight because they've got a huge responsibility at work and then family life and all that. Well, when your adrenals are not functioning the way that they should, you're not sleeping at night, you're producing cortisol, which is a stress hormone, when you shouldn't be. So guess what else goes up? Your cholesterol. Again, hormones made in the liver, everything is connected. Liver becomes inflamed. You start to put yourself into an inflammatory state just by taking on a lot of stress and not doing more self-care. So that's like one sort of approach. You know, for the folks that are retired, coming in with these diagnoses and, you know, worried about the ranges, getting me back to this blood pressure, that fasting blood glucose. Again, it's a matter of, okay, let's look at what medications are you on, okay? Sometimes these medications are creating other problems that they're not aware of, which are perpetuating why they can't get out of this sort of hole, okay? So for instance, I'll give you an example. I had a patient in his late 50s start care with me. He's got a very stressful job, pipelines, okay? Drilling pipelines, very stressful, okay? Very dangerous work, okay? So he's sort of supervising people that are like, you know, drilling into the ground and lots of crazy things can happen. So he's constantly in fight flight. Well, he has outrageous cholesterol and outrageous blood pressure. Well, why does he have high blood pressure? Well, he's so stressed out for the responsibility of people that he's got to make sure stay alive in his line of work. But why is his cholesterol up? So, you know, we had this discussion, you know, that comes in when I do a consult with a patient, takes about 45 minutes to an hour, because I really have to understand what's happening. Well, okay, so I'm on blood pressure medication, okay? He's like, I've been on it for about 5 years. It's not doing anything. And I have no energy. I'm fatigued. Every time somebody coughs or sneezes, I'm getting sick all the time. I don't understand. So we talk about this. One of the most common medications provided to somebody who has high blood pressure is called an ACE inhibitor, okay? ACE inhibitors deplete zinc in your body. Is your doctor going to tell you that? No. But if you don't supplement on the back end with zinc, then what? Your immune system is in the toilet. So you are going to be that person that might not get over a cold as quick. You might be that person that might have more of a risk of that comorbidity, to that outbreak we're speaking of, right? Because we're talking about these people have these metabolic diseases. Well, why? Because they're on medications to manage them, which are destroying their immunity. So it's helping one problem. I'm controlling my blood pressure, destroying my immunity. So another one, very common that we give patients with obviously high cholesterol. This is a billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry, like the losartans and all of these cholesterol-modifying drugs deplete CoQ10. This is an enzyme in the body that you need for cellular regeneration. So what does that mean in layman's terms? If you don't have CoQ10, you don't get better faster. You just don't. Your recovery time in general, whether it's from a workout injury or even a cold, is much broader than it should be because you don't have CoQ10. So the conversation is, well, I'm going to put you on the cholesterol modifier, but you also need to supplement with CoQ10. They're not being told that. So that's why these metabolic diseases are comorbidities to this outbreak, because Patients have destroyed their immunity by taking the medications for the associated diagnosis. The same thing goes with the blood sugar folks. You know, if you're sort of approaching that diabetic cusp, we'll put you on the metformin. And if that doesn't work, then we'll go to the insulin. Well, metformin depletes B12. If you know anything about vitamin B12, you need it to basically do everything in the body. But the major one is for happiness. You know, folks that are usually depressed because they're on these diabetic medications is because they're not being told to take B12. It destroys the B12. You have intrinsic factors in the stomach that require you to produce B12 to be used by the brain. So if we're taking metformin, we're depleting that. So we're depressed and fatigued by taking a blood sugar modifier. So, you know, folks don't get that back end conversation. So we talk about that because my job in functional medicine is to never take anybody off a med. I didn't prescribe it for you. I'm not taking you off of it. But can we talk about getting you to a place where you actually feel comfortable saying, hey, maybe I want to talk to my practitioner about modifying it, reducing it, coming up with a long-term safe plan to come off of this medication or something like that. I'll never say stop that, you know, it's not my job, but I will say let's supplement, let's get all these deficiencies back up, and through functional labs we'll find out where, and get you back to a place where you can have now this educated conversation with the person that prescribed this stuff for you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I kind of give you a softball and you hit a home run ×5 there because, yeah, the ranges are usually a bunch, they're not nonsense, but I mean, it's so hard to just like put someone in a category based on what you said is, you know, decades old, normalized, standardized data. And then if you're on the cusp, you know, you really don't know, you know, if you're fine or not. But I love the great points about the deficiencies. I mean, B12, yeah, that's a huge one. Maybe that's why vegans are always mad. I'm just kidding. I love vegans.
Vegans are tired. They're tired.
They're tired, but, you know, they're usually deficient in B12 if they're not supplementing because they don't know, but their heart's in the right place. So that's fine. But just kidding, all that ends. But for what I was going to say, yeah, for my approach, I mean, if you look at a blood panel, you know, you can get a general idea of where you're at, but how are you feeling every day? Are you tired? Are you, you know, brain fog? Is it coming up? Like you said, you know, stressed out all the time. If you have all these things going on in your life, you know, if you're overweight, if you're stressed out, if you're not sleeping enough and you just don't feel great, odds are that, you know, your body is not in good shape and you need to take control of your health. And usually you can ask someone, and if they give you an honest response, which is probably the hardest part, is to just coming to terms with your health and your day-to-day feelings, that they'll probably tell you that, yeah, you know, I'm pretty tired. If, you know, I could sleep 15 hours right now if I had the time, but I don't. I only have time to sleep 5 hours. I'm always stressed. The only time I have to eat, always tired, brain fog, you know. And then if you're overweight, that's when you can't hide, but that's usually, the last straw for a lot of people, because then once their physical appearance change, they're like, oh crap, okay, I should probably do it. Yeah. But before it even gets to that point, all these other things are happening, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we talk a lot about that. So I want to dive into maybe like the diet part of things, or just simple fixes that people can make in their life. We talk about stress, we talk about sleep, we talk about diet a little bit. What do you think are the easiest things that people can do, or that they can swap in their lives to just generally feel better and, you know, get their health on the right track as like the first steps?
Sure. So actually my website and the new and improved, it's actually labwellhealthcare.com. And over there in the search bar for your listeners, they can go ahead and click an instant download, which is what I designed as the Metabolic Disease diet. These are the exact foods I tell my patients to eat and the exact foods I tell them to avoid. So please feel free to go and steal that there. But in a most general sense, without having a patient in front of me and a diagnosis in front of me, I would say the first and foremost is to look at what is it that you are eating? Because believe it or not, most people eat once or twice a day. nobody eats breakfast anymore. I don't know why. And if it's something on the run, but then it's like kind of something midday and then this huge dinner at the end of the day to make up for all the calories lost. Okay. So that is really what I've seen. Very common here in the South. I'm sure not a surprise, but really overall, the busier you get, the less focused you are on the self-care aspect. You know, I hear when I start working with a patient to clean up the diet, it is a almost instant pushback on eating breakfast because I don't have the time. I'm not hungry. They're not hungry because they're on a lot of medication. But if we don't have 15 minutes, we don't have a life. Okay. So we need the 15 minutes in the morning. There are some great protein rich shakes, even foods to eat for people on the go. But the first thing is to say, what are you eating? Okay. And then we can talk about what you're not eating. And the first thing it would be to have to scale back on processed, fast, convenience, and packaged foods because we cannot control what those genetically engineered ingredients do once they come into the body. Okay. These foods taste good because they've got a ton of genetically engineered fats and sugars that aren't good for us. It's not from nature. So you can go as simple as to say, let's pull out the stuff that comes from a bag and start eating the stuff that comes out of the ground. Okay. Because sometimes for some folks that have been eating this way for decades and you start telling them to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, they're glazed over. Okay. So you have to say, let's even make it even more simple. And what you would normally grab from a box or a bag, let's swap this out. And I like to start with simple swaps. So in the morning, if somebody is accustomed to not eating at all, these really good quality protein shakes come in handy because they're going to drink their coffee on the way to work anyway. So now we're getting protein in, which means we're going to stabilize our blood sugar. That is the name of the game, protein first thing. If we don't, we're going to have a blood sugar spike midday and set ourselves up for disaster. This is also the precursor to obesity. This is why adipose fat cell tissues deposit and hang out in the midsection, and we have this sort of pendulous abdomen appearance is because we are protein deficient and our body is just basically living off of starchy carbs, these genetic processed foods. So the first step would be to swap out. If you're somebody that doesn't eat breakfast, try the shake in the morning, okay? If you're somebody that actually considered yourself a breakfast eater and you're going through a drive-through at a fast food national chain, now we have to say, what can we swap there? Okay, because like a muffin with an egg from a fast food place is not the best choice when you can make something equivalent at home. Okay, the starches in the gluten in a lot of these like breakfast sandwiches, so to speak, they're terrible for our blood sugar and they're terrible for our cholesterol. Okay. It's not so much the fat as it is those starchy, refined, genetically engineered carbs first thing. So we want to try and start broadening, the mindset of people that are conditioned to the breakfast sandwich in the morning and then broadening that, like what are some good alternatives? Okay. The next thing would be to try and scale back from I don't need to eat all day and then this big dinner into how do we eat smaller meals throughout the day so that we're not starving at the end of the day, because that's another precursor to diabetes and obesity is eating late at night. I mean, everybody thinks you can just eat, gorge, and then go lay down. And that's terrible, not only for digestion, but your metabolism, right? It's the fastest way to get fat.
And your sleep, yeah.
Okay. So, you definitely want people to sort of become open-minded to, okay, what can I be eating during the day? So again, in the metabolic disease diet that I have on my website, I'm going to tell you exactly what to avoid and foods to eat. So, the omega-3 rich foods that come in the cold water fishes and walnuts and chia seeds and flax seeds, these are all terms that somebody who eats a breakfast sandwich, I just lost, right? Because they're going to a drive-through. You say chia seed, they're like, dude, peace. I'm out. Done. You're not going to sell me on a chia seed, okay? Fast food, drive-through, that's my jam. So you have to even scale back from that and say, okay, well, that's going to be down the line. let's talk about a protein shake. Let's talk about good sources of protein. And I don't hate dairy. A lot of people think, dairy is the enemy. There's actually good sources of dairy. Whey protein isolate shakes are great, easily digested. And as long as they come from grass-fed cows, I'm in. Okay, I'm not a dairy hater. So protein shakes, get the metabolism stable first thing in the day. Lunch, fresh fruits and vegetables are king. So for somebody, again, maybe somebody that's on the road, that's a lunch skip, or they just pick up something, again, you want to say, all right, where can I get a majority of my nutrients? Okay. Lunch ideally is like a great time of day to get all your food in, right? Because it'll help you coast the rest of the day. It's not ideal. We get busy. Sometimes I don't eat lunch. It just happens and I'm eating at 3 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock. But you have to just be realistic and say, well, you know what? If I'm new to this, then maybe it is just like an apple. I know that sounds crazy, but an apple with almond butter, you're getting good fat, you're getting low glycemic sugar, you're getting a fruit. There's, nuts have protein. It is almost like one of these like no-brainer stable snacks that's good for like a newbie, somebody that's really going to start eating healthy for the first time, because nobody can make that excuse to me. I can't put an apple or almond butter in my car. I'm like, liar, liar, pants on fire. Yes, you can. And you can also like set it up in a little cooler in your front seat. You don't have to go to the drive-thru. There's your fat, sugar, protein. Very good. Keep your energy up so you don't have that afternoon slump. And then, when you go into dinner, then you can start, poultry, grass-fed meats, organic, turkey. You can start putting in cleaner proteins. I don't think red meat's the enemy. Again, I think that's an antiquated way of thinking from the 80s. I think red meat is a great source of protein. I think all animal proteins are a great source of protein. And I understand the group of ethical folks that are vegan. I get that too, as long as you're getting what you need. So again, for patients that are in my clinic, once we cross the bridge of what I call like deconditioning, I have to break down their way of thinking. Their relationship with food is about to change, right? For the better, because I know they're going to evolve and be like, wow, I feel great. But we've got to break that sort of down. And it's almost like a reconditioning. I may put them in a sort of anti-inflammatory path, right? And that is pulling out all of these toxic foods, eating as anti-inflammatory as possible throughout the day to keep their levels up. And then we can start looking at things after a period of time, because they've got to get reacquainted with eating again. And they might actually start to feel better. So then we can start saying, you know what, I've had patients after doing anti-inflammatory diet for about 6 weeks, decide that they want to go vegan, decide that they want to bust through a lot of these lab values with no medication at all. And I mean, if you pull out all of your animal proteins, you've got perfect labs. I mean, that's the truth. But that doesn't mean those animal proteins drive up all of your standard labs into a negative area. That's not the case. Some people get so pumped up and so fired up over those numbers and obsess, and they want to go that vegan route, pull all those proteins out. Now, I think that's great for short term. I don't think those are sustainable in any sense, because eventually you're going to be at a party, right? You're going to be out, you're going to be on the road, you're going to travel. Yeah. So, I think, again, it's just an open, honest conversation about how are you eating? Let's pull out inflammatory foods first, put in really good quality sources of nutrients, slowly transition, and then, cross that bridge where let's run some functional labs. Where are we still nutrient deficient? Let's get those supplements in. And then maybe there might be some more extreme measures after that of what we would do to tweak the diet. Because again, genetics will come into play. So if you're coming from a whole line of diabetics, there might be some foods you can't really ever eat. It might be a once a year thing. And that's the truth. So then you cross that line. Once you can kind of transition them, you can pick apart, well, what's the hereditary component here? Is this patient coming from this, and this? Maybe this is something to avoid, for a while, longer term.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, I know we're almost at time here, so just a quick summary. I mean, for everyone just not eating what they want or what they should be, just get closer to whole foods, natural foods, a sweet potato as opposed to fries. You can make your own sweet potato fries. If there's one ingredient, because it's a fruit or vegetable, I mean, that's king, right? instead of reading a package. And well, no one reads the ingredient labels besides people like us. So just starting with that, the fewer ingredients in your meals, the better. And just, at first, you don't have to just clean, cold cut everything out. Just try and transition, swap in a breakfast, see how it goes. And then you'll eventually start craving that because, you build the better gut microbiome that really craves. I mean, I crave kale now. It sounds weird, but it's because I just love it. I mean, 2-3 years ago, I would never crave kale, but it's because I eat it a lot. It's great for my body and my body wants more. So swapping that in, and, just looking up recipes. There's so much content online now, and then maybe reaching out to someone like you, or looking at your recipes or videos or posts, and it can guide you. Do it with a friend or a family member, just shifting that thought process to whole foods. You know where it comes from, and it's going to be quality. That's the best. But I know we're out of time here, so thanks so much for coming on. But last question is, where can people find you? I know you have an Instagram, a website.
Yeah. So at Dr. Francesca LeBlanc on Instagram, of course, on Facebook. Labwell Healthcare is the new and improved website, so you can read all about me, functional medicine. There's some really great articles there. I'm really big on writing evidence-based articles, so all of my blog posts are actually research-based. I don't use any sources that are not peer-reviewed because I really like to be a resource for people that's not just some ambiguous blogger. And head on over there, claim your free download. That'll be a metabolic disease diet for anyone. I mean, if you know anyone that has high blood pressure, they are the person that's like, all right, I'm going grocery shopping. What do I buy? So it's a great little download to take with you to the store and be like, I can eat that. I can eat that. That's the big thing. Focus on what you can eat and not so much on what you can't eat.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, everyone, check out her website, her Instagram, and thank you so much for coming on the Health Bigs podcast. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Thanks.